Welcome to Mom Boss Central. I'm your host, Alexia Hoffman. This podcast is where entrepreneurial moms like you and me come together for real and raw conversations filled with practical tips, genuine stories, and a whole lot of girl power. But it's not just about listening, it's about building a community. If you haven't already, make sure to join at mombosscentral.com. So whether you're sipping on a cup of coffee, pouring yourself a glass of wine, or tuning in on the go, get ready to join the conversation and become part of our supportive Mom Boss Central community. We're here with Rose to welcome to the podcast. Can you give our listeners a quick introduction and a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name is Rose Clark. I'm an authorized language of listening parenting coach, and I work with moms and dads to get them to a place where they love the way they parent. And I have two kids of my own that I've been parenting. They're 10 and 12, and really fell in love with the model when my kids were 5 and 3. And it has certainly supported us through many difficult challenges that come along with, parenthood and motherhood. And even, I like to tell people my husband's a therapist, and even he'll tell you that our marriage is better as a result of this parenting model. And it's definitely helped me in running a couple of different businesses as well. So happy to hop into all of those kind of topics and see where this goes.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into it. So tell me a little bit more about when you got into business relating to the ages of your kids and what that looked like.
Yeah. So actually, my husband and I started out fairly early in our marriage running a retail shop. So we did have one baby at that point, and we started running a retail shop together and have moved away from that. But during that time, we had a lot going on. So we had two young children, running a retail shop. I started finding that motherhood was really difficult, especially challenging with the childhood trauma that I had from my own childhood that was now kind of surfacing in new ways as a mom with two kids under 2. And so I started doing a lot of research. I wanted to say, like, okay, what's going on here? Because I knew that I didn't want to repeat the things that had been done to me. And I thought that just knowing that I didn't want to do it was going to be enough. But I remember going to my husband one day and saying, like, I need tools. I don't even know if the tools that I want in particular for the way I want my parenting to go, I don't even know if those tools exist, but I'm going to start looking. And I started reading all the blog posts and all the books, and came across language of listening. It was the one that I settled on because it was the one that worked consistently in the way that I really needed it to. And it was giving me the exact things that I really wanted in my own motherhood. And I noticed that they had a coaches training coming up. And I really had this deep longing in my heart to support other moms, especially moms who had experienced childhood trauma. And so to become a coach with them, it was a 2-year training. Like I said, when we began, my children were 3 and 5. And so we were running a retail shop, and I was doing this training and then starting that business as well. So we had 2 businesses going for a little while there. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So how did you juggle that? I mean, a 2-year training is no joke. It's, that's extensive for sure. In addition to parenting and having a marriage and having a business, what did that look like? And, what were you experiencing in that season?
Yeah, well, I would say that, it was very busy. It felt very overwhelming. And even trying to get support wasn't always the easiest thing. We didn't have daycare, that sort of thing. We did want our kids to be at home. And so not only was I doing my training, but my husband and I had decided to job share. So he would stay home with the girls one day, and while I would go and look after a retail shop, and then I would stay home. But then also it was my job to look after all the social media, the website, all that stuff, besides working, every second day actually in the job, and looking after the kids every second day. So it felt very overwhelming at the time. But as things started to progress with my language of listening training, I was getting more and more skills that were really helping me communicate with my kids, communicate with my husband, communicate with my customers, and so all of that started to balance out over time.
Yeah, that's amazing. So speak a little bit more about what that looked like and how you were able to implement that.
Yeah, well, I think one of the really important pieces that a lot of us struggle with, especially people who had a difficult childhood, is boundaries. Boundaries are huge, right? Trying to figure out how we're going to spend our time, what we're going to say yes to, what we're going to say no to. But not just that, like part of it is the boundaries in the parenting too, right? About like being able to hold boundaries with our kids, because if we have the same issues coming up with our kids over and over again that we're having to deal with, that's taking up a lot of our time, a lot of time that we could either be spending working on our business or spending time actually, deepening the connection that we have with our kids. And the really cool thing about language of listening is it did two things. One is it helped me totally reconnect with what my boundaries were. It taught me how to identify them because I had really lost my ability to really even know, well, what are my boundaries in particular? And it's really hard to hold boundaries when they're not your own, when you're always trying to hold other people's boundaries all the time.
Yeah.
And, even just the basic struggles of, the return policy in our retail shop, right? Being able to hold those boundaries also and not spend a lot of time on customers that are upset or that don't understand that kind of thing, but being able to talk them through in a very healthy way, what the boundaries are, that was really, really huge. So, and I can just, really just kind of throw out there if people are interested in going, okay, that sounds really cool. Like, I do feel like I'm disconnected from my boundaries. I do feel like I don't even really know what my boundaries are. A very quick activity that your listeners can do is they can get 20 to 30 minutes on their own and just sit down and start writing a list and write out everything they can think of that they like and everything that they can think of that they dislike. And this is a way to really get in touch with your boundaries, because your boundaries are really just likes and dislikes. They're your preferences. And so just that kind of beginning to start to connect with that starts to give you like an idea of who you are. And it pulls you out of really worrying about other people's judgments about your boundaries. Because boundaries are not about like what other people like and dislike. They're about what you like and dislike. And some people are going to dislike your boundaries, right? Some people are going to dislike them. Yeah. And so it really takes a lot of the drama out of it, because you're just like, I'm just not okay with this thing. I just don't like this thing. It's just who I am. Just like the sky is blue. The first thing on my likes list was that I love red licorice. And that really has little to do with boundaries, right? The fact that I love red licorice. But just that activity of really getting to know yourself and go, oh, this is just who I am. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's very, very powerful way to start to just get connected and to start to remove the drama from the boundaries. Because I'll tell you something really, really important about boundaries, whether you're holding them with clients or customers or your spouse or your children, is the energy and the emotion that you have when you're holding a boundary, when you're speaking up about that boundary, really lands inside the other person on a subconscious level. And so if you trying to hold a boundary with a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of fear, that person's going to pick up on the anger, the frustration, and the fear. They're going to start feeling those emotions themselves. And that's what you're going to get back. You're going to get back an answer from them with the same kind of energy. So when you can really get to a place of full self-acceptance, when it comes to your boundaries and when it comes to who you are and what your preferences are, you're going to come, like, let's say with your kids, for example, boundaries in parenting, they're always about being loving and protective. They're always about moving the child towards growing in certain life skills. And if you come with this trust in them, if you come with this just the way things are, and we're going to figure this out together, right?
Yeah,
it's so
definitely
different than, why are you doing this to me? You're so frustrated. Right? Because we pick up on that. We just do as humans. We don't talk a lot about how much we pick up on it, but our nervous systems really pick up on, what's behind other people's communications, their emotions, their energy, all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. So for somebody who is struggling with that with their kids, after making the list, what would be kind of that next step for actually implementing that with their kids if they've noticed that energy is kind of misaligned with what they're hoping to give off?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the most important things is to really move in and validate yourself. So validation is the first tool that we use in language of listening. And the really cool thing about this parenting model is that it works in every relationship, including your relationship with yourself. So if you need to hold a boundary, if you need to hold a boundary, you can use the first step with validation. We call it say what you see, where that's exactly what you do, is you just talk about what you're seeing. Okay. But what I'll get moms to do when they're really struggling is I'll say, as long as it's safe to leave the kiddos for a minute, go in the bathroom, close the door, look at yourself in the mirror and start talking about how you feel, but talk about it as though you're an observer. Talk to yourself using the word you. So let's say you've asked your kid 10 times to put their shoes on. It's time to get out the door. They're still playing with their dinky cars. right? And you're just, you asked 10 times, you tried to be that patient mom that you really want to be, right? And then you're just like, we just have to get out the door. I'm losing it here. Like, right. And so instead of yelling at your kid, you can get into the bathroom, close the door, look at yourself in the mirror and just talk. You're so frustrated. You're so frustrated right now. And what you want to do is you want to really validate how you're feeling, because how you're feeling is fine. Your emotions are all they are is messages. There's nothing wrong with you if you're angry. There's nothing wrong with you if you're frustrated. You're not a bad mom. It's just telling you your boundaries have been crossed.
So important to hear.
Yeah. It's telling you that your boundaries have been crossed. And if you tend to be somewhat of a people pleaser, like I was when I came out of my abusive childhood, I was very much a people pleaser, right? And I was very much trying to be that mom who was patient all the time. It didn't really feel like it was okay to get mad. And so I would stuff my anger until it completely blew up, right? And then my anger was spilling out all over my kids, right? And that's not the way I wanted it to be, right? So if you can get in the bathroom and acknowledge you're feeling really angry right now, this is not cool. You want to blow your stack, right? And when you can get down to what you really want in that moment, which is going to come out when you make yourself right to feel how you feel. I always like to say when it's okay to have a problem, that's when it's okay to go ahead and solve the problem. When we think there's something wrong with us for being angry, right? When we think there's something wrong with us for being angry, or it's not okay for us to be frustrated, you can't actually solve the frustration. You
That's so true. Wow.
Hold your boundary if it's not okay for you to feel anger and frustration, because it's just telling you you have a boundary, right?
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. I feel like I have done some work with boundaries just from, childhood stuff and thinking about how I want to parent, right? And even within my marriage, working through boundary work, but to rephrase it in a way of likes and dislikes and leading my frustration, it makes sense, like to feel like, okay, that's why I'm frustrated, because it's not lining up with my likes and my dislikes. To even just, put it to that simple of terms makes it feel so much more manageable and less scary and overwhelming, because there is times with my kids, it's like, why am I exploding on them? It was such a simple thing, but if I look at the context, it's okay, boundary broken. I didn't like that. And it's okay. At the same time, I need to respond with, patience and love, but I need to validate my experience as it's, it is something that's upsetting to me for whatever reason. So that's so interesting to almost like simplify it to such a basic level. I've not heard that before. I think that's so helpful.
Yeah. And this is what the founder of this parenting model has been able to do, actually, is to really simplify. She took child-parent relationship therapy, positive psychology, and transformational coaching and turned it into these 3 beautiful tools that, like I say, work for every relationship, including your relationship with yourself.
Yeah. So to look at you and like how you've applied that with your kids, can you give an example of a time where you felt like you were really struggling with communication and patience with them, like we've kind of spoken about, and how you were able to implement that or implement some change in your reaction?
Yeah, sure. Well, there's 2 examples that have kind of popped into my mind. So let's continue on with this example that I've already given. And then I'll tell you a quick story about how using that validation with my daughter just completely changed around a situation that was like super frustrating. So using the tool with myself in one place and using it with my daughter in another. So that idea of like our kids not getting our shoes on, like that just comes out of my own head, because that's been my experience. And it's one that I know a lot of people experience, right? So when you get yourself in the bathroom and you're validating yourself, or I got myself in the bathroom as validating myself, right? And it's okay to have that problem, and it's okay to recognize, okay, I am frustrated. There is a boundary being crossed. Like, once you start to get that acceptance, your brain will start to download solutions to the problem. And it's really important for you to take that validation and move it into acknowledging what you want, right? Because in that moment, what does mom really probably want? She just wants her kids to put their shoes on the first time she asks. Like, it's that simple, right? Like, that's really what we want, so that we can get out the door, right? And this is typically like, like you're there, you're holding your little one, right? When you've got a little, especially a new little one, and you have older kids, maybe a toddler, or whatever, you kind of really need that kid to put their shoes on the first time you ask, because you're over there doing 10 things with the baby, trying to get them ready to go out the door, pack their diaper bag, right? Probably pack a few things for the toddler, probably change a diaper, all the things, let alone trying to get yourself looking presentable to the world, right? It would be really great if your toddler would get their shoes on the first time that you ask, and it's just not a skill they have right now. Or perhaps the way that we're asking is not clear. You know, I can't tell you how much of a difference it's made for me with my kids when I tag on a little phrase that says, and I'd like you to do it right away. Because if we're not clear about, right, when we want them to get stuff done, they'll do it on their own time, because who shows them how to do things on your own time? Parents, right? Our kids come and ask us to do things, and we do it on our own time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Clear. Yeah, and adding on that tagline. So sometimes it's about the way that we ask, and sometimes it's about taking a couple of, you know, trial runs to really be with the toddler and show them, when I ask you to put your shoes on, we're going to go and do it right away every time mom asks, because it means it's really close to being time to leaving. And in that way, so acknowledging that you're angry and frustrated, seeing what your boundary is, seeing what you really want, it's so clear. I just want them to put their shoes on the first time I ask. Now you're like, okay, you've kind of starting to get this game plan. And the cool thing is the fact that you're already connected to yourself and you've already validated yourself allows you to make a decision about how you're going to teach your child that life skill in a way that's in line with who you are, instead of out of frustration, because that's not who you are. Doing something out of anger and frustration in a way you don't like is not who you are.
Yeah.
Right? It's still important for us to know how to use frustration and anger. Those are important emotions. Every emotion is equally important. But it's because they're all just messages, though. Right? So being able to have that connection to yourself gets you in that calm place to be able to move on and figure out what's going to work best for your toddler, for teaching them the life skill of getting them out the door, or getting them to get their shoes on the first time they ask.
Yeah.
So I'll share another story.
Hearing you,
go ahead.
Oh yeah. I think just hearing you say, I definitely want to hear. But then hearing you say about, you know, that how we act out of frustration and anger is not who we are. I think that's so important for, you know, moms to hear, especially moms who are in the thick of young kids, business, life feels like it's flying at you. And of course we get frustrated, and sometimes we lose our temper, lack of patience, or whatever it is. And like, that's okay. That's not who we are as a mom because we act out of that frustration one time. I think that's just so important for anybody listening who's maybe had one of those episodes in the last week or month. And, you know, if you're feeling guilt around that, to let that guilt go and understand that that doesn't shape us. We can move forward from it. I think a big thing for me is to try to repair with my kids quickly. You know, when I make a mistake, to acknowledge that. And I mean, my twins are only 16 months, so they don't really know what I'm saying, but I'm still trying to get in the habit of saying, I know this was wrong and I'm sorry, so that as they're older and they do understand, they see that. But, you know, for anyone listening, you know, if you're feeling guilt around that, it is not who you are as a mom. You can apologize still and move forward. And I think to hear where that's coming from can also feel so validating, to remove that guilt of course you were frustrated. Of course you got upset, and that's okay. So.
Yeah. Well, and let's swing that back to the likes and dislikes for a quick second, because this is really powerful too.
Yeah.
If you blow up at your kids, if you yell at your kids and you didn't like it, it's not who you are, because your likes and your dislikes, they actually aren't just your boundaries. They make up your identity. So when you do something that you don't like, it's really not who you are. Right. And then that empowers you to go, oh, that's not me. I can change, because it's not who I am. It's not actually fundamentally who I am, because I didn't like it. That's how I know.
Yeah, that's so good. So cool. Okay. Wow. I love that. Yeah. And it's so interesting to talk about the likes and dislikes of how wide a range that could be. You know what I mean? Like from red licorice to I don't like yelling, and to like, it's just so interesting, because where do you start and, you know, where do you stop with the list? But it's also important, I think, to shaping those boundaries, which is interesting, because it does come back to the day-to-day Monday things that creep up on you. If you don't like something that may seem insignificant, but if you look at your list and all of those dislikes are coming up at once, that's going to probably lead to a lot more frustration than you would realize. And it makes sense when you see it that way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us about the story with your daughter then too, that you were going to share.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's another getting out the door on time story, actually, but it's just how I used that say what you see tool with her. And it really bought me time, because I was feeling super agitated. I was really, really frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
It was cold. It was winter. I live in Canada, and we were supposed to go pick my husband up from work, and it was late, and my other daughter was already outside. And this one girl, she
Mm.
was just my youngest. She was just dragging her feet. I was like, what the heck? And I finally got everything in gear. And she was about to go out the door. And then she turned away and started walking away from the door. And I was just like, it was bubbling up inside, right? So I just went with the say what you see. And the way we describe the say what you see tool is you just reflect back to the child anything you see them saying, doing, thinking, or feeling. So I just said, you're walking away from the door. That's it. I just kept it really objective, really right? Just, you are walking away from the door, And all she wanted to do was go get a scarf for her teddy bear. And it bought me just 3 seconds to just stop, just 3 seconds. That's all it needed. To see her pick a scarf up off the floor and wrap it around her teddy bear's neck, because that was the thing that she needed. She didn't want to go. She did not want to go. But putting a scarf around the teddy bear was the thing that she could do to get herself out the door.
Yeah.
And so instead of it turning into this different mess.
Yeah. And how different it would have been if you didn't and you yelled or exploded or got frustrated, it would have been a whole different scene and probably taken a lot longer to get out the door than those 3 seconds that it took for her to put the scarf on the bear. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good. Yeah. So,
and again,
talk a little bit about your time with your kids and how you balance that with your business and having, too close an age and all the things you're doing.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, the magic weapon that I have in my back pocket are these 15-minute mini playtimes that I have with my daughters that I learned from Language of Listening. They were originally half an hour once a week. But what I've done is I've taken them and shortened them to 15 minutes. And typically with the half-hour playtimes, we have like a bunch of different toys and that sort of thing. All I need and all I have my clients tell my clients that they need is just a timer and some Play-Doh. That's all you need. Typically a couple of different colors of Play-Doh. And you can just put the timer on for 15 minutes. That's it. And the 15-minute thing is really cool for a couple of different reasons. One is, I'll be honest, I actually have a hard time sitting down and playing with my kids for extended period of time. I just feel really antsy. Mm-hmm. There's so much to do. I'm a doer, and I love my kids and I love being really close to them. It's much easier at the end of the day for me to settle down at bedtime. I spend tons of time with them at bedtime. But during the day when there's things to do, I'm really agitated and I really want to get things done. So I can handle, if I know the timer's just going to be on for 15 minutes, I can be fully present with my children during that time. And during that time, I just use the 3 tools from Language of Listening. And one of the big ones is that validation tool, is that say what you see. And when you sit with your child and you just let them play with the Play-Doh, however they like, now you can hold boundaries, right? They're going to be in charge of the playtime. They're going to be in charge of making decisions about what they're going to make and all that stuff. But if they start throwing Play-Doh across the room, that's when you can kind of step in and hold your boundaries, But during that time, what you do is you use a lot of that say what you see. You kind of like a sportscaster, and you just point out to the child what you see them doing, right? So you're rolling the Play-Doh. You don't even talk about really what they're making per se. It might look like they're making a snowman. You don't even talk about their end product, just what they're doing and what they're experiencing it. You're squishing that in your hand. It's soft and squishy, right? You're rolling it like a ball. You picked blue. Blue's your favorite color. Using the likes and dislikes with your kids, by the way, is hugely powerful because you're validating their identity. Okay. So likes and dislikes, you start using them with yourself. But I will tell you, it's my husband's favorite part of Language of Listening. He's like, I love it when you point out my likes and dislikes because it feels to that person like you really know who they are. Right. So you can say that to your kid. You chose blue. That's your favorite color. And they start to feel known in that moment for 15 minutes. And you'll start to see them doing very specific things to get you say specific things, right? And it just feeds their connection so deeply. And I think a really powerful thing that I can share about the 15-minute playtimes is, I was doing them a lot with my kids. They were fantastic. A couple of years ago, we moved from the East Coast of Canada to Central Canada. And when you're moving, when you're going on trips, when you've got different things that are like maybe throwing your routine off or throwing your life off, if you can just have a couple of jars of Play-Doh and sit down for
Yeah.
15 minutes and do a playtime with your child, that really, really makes a big difference. But again, it's really when you know the right things to say and the right way to show up for those 15 minutes, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
So again, that say what you see. And I'll tell you something about say what you see that's really important, is that you never make it about you. You never say, I see that
Mm.
you chose blue. You just say you chose. You always try to start with the word you as much as possible
Oh,
and make
wow.
it about them. That's really, really important.
Okay.
That's what really makes them feel seen and really actually helps
That's
you
so
to
good.
keep an objective mind as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good
Um,
to know. An important tip.
yeah. And so what it worked really, really well for with my youngest has, we highly suspect that she's got ADHD, and there's a lot of school anxiety that's come along
Hmm.
with that. And we were really struggling with getting her out the door. She wouldn't have breakfast. She wouldn't get dressed. She wouldn't put her snowsuit on. And it was always this big fight, about half an hour, 45 minutes to finally get her out the door. And usually my husband was carrying her out to the van, to get her to drive her to school. And then it clicked for me one day, oh my gosh, I have these 15-minute playtimes. And I want to really share about them. And I think in the midst of that, I'll share about the 3 needs that we talk about in language of listening, because the needs are something that you can look for inside the playtimes. Because the playtimes, they're about spending time with your kid, but they're also about really becoming a student of who your child is and really getting to know what their strengths are and the ways that they meet their needs. These are really, really important things for you to know about your child. So I started doing these 15-minute playtimes with her with the Play-Doh in the morning. And so that was it. Instead of a half an hour or 45-minute fight, all I needed to do was play Play-Doh with her for 15 minutes. And she
Yeah.
always did the same thing. She always did the same thing.
Okay.
And what she would do is she would direct me to make little cubes out of the Play-Doh. And so I would make
Okay.
these cubes and put them on the table. And she would always bring this little finger puppet that she had, a little pig that she'd put on her fingers. And the little pig would come along. She named him Ketchup. And Ketchup would come along and he would squish the cubes over and over again. Usually before I could even
Yeah.
get a second cube made, the first cube was squished. And in that, I was
Okay.
like, oh, she's meeting her need for power. So that's one of the 3 needs from language of listening. And power is about feeling
Oh, wow.
capable, right? And a little bit, I think it was
Yeah.
like about beating mom, getting the cubes squished
Yeah.
before mom can make all the cubes. And it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense because in the classroom, she was feeling powerless. When she was going to
Mm.
school, there were a lot of feelings of powerlessness that were causing her anxiety. And so for me to sit with her for 15 minutes in the morning and allow her to
Yeah.
beat me at making the cubes so she could squish them
Yeah.
over and over again, that really filled up her power, her power bar, I guess you could say, right? It really filled it up and she felt
Yeah.
ready to go to school after that, which was really, really
Yeah.
cool. And so watching
Yeah.
for what your kids are doing with the Play-Doh, because they can do all sorts of things with Play-Doh. I mean, you'd be
Yeah.
shocked, right?
Yeah.
So that
Definitely.
was, really,
That's so
really,
interesting.
yeah. And so I can talk about how other needs show up. The other 2 needs show up in a playtime too. So parents can, if they want to try to do these playtimes with their kids,
Yeah, definitely.
they can be looking. So yeah, again, the need for power is just feeling capable. So you might see, a child that wants to knock over something that you make, or if they want to build something that's really, really difficult. If you see your child putting themselves in a place of frustration over and over again in their playtime, there's so many clues about who our children are in these playtimes. But if you see them building the same thing over and over again, that feels really difficult. They may be trying to meet their need for power, but they're also maybe sending you a message that something else in their life is feeling really hard to do. So we watch for any patterns that kind of show up. So there's the need for power.
Wow.
The need for experience is very basic. The need for experience is just, I've got this body, what can I do with it? I've got this life, how can I enjoy it, right? So when kids are playing with Play-Doh, it could be if they're just only squishing. It could be if they're throwing it, that can be experimentation. That's part of meeting the need for experience. When I talk about the need for experience, I like to tell people about, during the pandemic at the beginning, we were living in Nova Scotia, Canada, and it was so strict there, like super, super strict. And everything was locked down. You couldn't go to the library. The schools were closed down. You weren't even allowed to go for a walk in the park outdoors. You'd get fined if you went for a walk. It was nuts. So we were stuck in at home. You were allowed to go for a walk once a day outside in your neighborhood. They never checked on people about that. I mean, if you went for a walk twice a day, nobody checked, but still it was like really strict, And so my kids really needed to meet their need for experience. They really needed to experiment with things. They really needed to kind of grow and learn. So I started finding my jewelry in bits and pieces all over the house. I started finding shampoo smeared on my bathroom wall. And I'm like, okay, they're meeting their need for experience. And I don't like it. I don't like the ways that they're meeting their need for experience. And so this is, again, another one of the ways that language of listening works, where we figure out what the need is. We see, okay, this is what need they're meeting. And then we can help them find a way to meet that need inside of our boundaries. And so that's kind of experience. So what can I do with this Play-Doh? What can I do with my body with this Play-Doh while I'm playing, here with mom?
Yeah.
And then the last one's the need for connection. And I think that one's pretty obvious, and it's automatically getting met when we're doing that say what you see with our kids, just becoming the sportscaster of what they're doing and what they're experiencing and, kind of what choices they're making as they play with the Play-Doh. And what parents will find is usually once the playtime is over, sometimes the kids struggle a bit when that timer goes off. Okay, and that 15-minute timer goes off. Sometimes they have a bit of a meltdown, and that's okay. We just go and we validate that too, right? We don't make it a problem that they don't like that the playtime is over, right? But what we want to do is we can use that situation to help them grow in a life skill to say, hey, when something's over and you're disappointed, here's what you can do. That's all, because it's just telling you that they're disappointed. That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And the louder they are, it's just the deeper they feel it. That's all. But if we can help them find a way to handle their disappointment, and this is a huge tip for parenting. It's one that I think is really, really important that I like to pass on to people, is how okay it is to be disappointed, and what an incredible life skill it is to teach your child how to deal with their disappointment in a way that leaves them feeling empowered instead of like it's a problem that they feel disappointed.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good.
Disappointed,
so good.
If you're disappointed about something, maybe there's another way you can get it. If it's okay to be disappointed.
Yeah.
If it's not okay to be disappointed, then you're just sticking with disappointment for the whole rest of your life, and you never gain that life skill.
Yeah.
So it's hugely important.
True. Wow. That's so interesting. And so just a few follow-up questions, because I'm so intrigued. And I think this is something that I think so many people listening will want to apply, because it's so tangible and also so simple. It doesn't feel like it needs, a lot of tools that are great require a lot of practice to do them at the right time. And that isn't always very tangible, or, it takes a long time to learn the skills. But this doesn't feel like something that needs a lot of work up to make it possible. So for someone looking to implement those 15-minute, play dates, my first question is, does it always have to be Play-Doh? If not, what other are good alternatives, maybe for someone with younger children or older children? What are other ways they can do that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, actually, because some people don't like Play-Doh. Some people are like, actually, I hate Play-Doh. I hate cleaning up Play-Doh. I never want to clean that up, right? So that's a great question. And again, allowing people to follow their likes and dislikes when it comes to spending time with your kids, because it doesn't have to be fully sacrificial when you're spending time with your kids. It's okay for you to enjoy it too. Actually, it's important for you to enjoy it too. So yes, there's lots of different mediums you could use. So you could use Lego. You could use you could use paints and paper if you're okay with that. You could use just pencil crayons and paper if you're okay with that. People that have older kids, I've had people with teenagers that are going like, my kid doesn't want to play Play-Doh Pros. Like, what the heck? And I'm like, that's fine. Some teenagers would actually. They would love if they feel very artistic, they might love that. But you can play video games with that. You can bake with that. You can take them out on a coffee date, really. Because it's really about that time when you're fully focused on them, and you're really using that say what you see to really validate who they are. Really get to know who they are and validate it so that they feel centered in themselves. They can trust themselves. Self-trust, I think, is the most important. Unconditional self-trust is the most important, really, I guess, life skill that I pass on to my clients. And one of the reasons why I love passing it on to them is because then they have it to give to their children as well. And I think that's really, really huge. So learning how to, have that unconditional self-trust, which a lot of us are taught to have the opposite. We're told you can't trust yourself, right?
And I had read about, I was doing some reading on parenting stuff, as we do, just how can I be better and what am I doing wrong and all of those questions. And I thought it was so interesting about, as kids, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so I apologize if I'm not saying it correctly, but it was from Good Inside. And she was speaking to the fact that the kids have two basic struggles. And one is to not trust themselves, or two, to think they've done something wrong to deserve whatever outburst it is from a parent. So those are the two. They're either, they don't believe they're remembering it correctly, or they believe that it's their fault for some reason. And I think looking back just at myself as a kid, it's so interesting because I do see those experiences where I questioned how I remembered something. And I did it up and I mean, through college, even. I just didn't trust what my beliefs were about the experience. Oh, I must be exaggerating. It probably wasn't that bad. I'm sure I'm, remembering it incorrectly. And how that shaped so many of my experiences, and just, becoming an adult where I see that in myself, and to try to instill my kids to trust themselves is so important. And I think it does how, and good inside what Dr. Becky speaks about too, is how if you have she uses the example of like a teenage daughter, you want them to be able to trust themselves to say no and feel confident in that decision. If they're in a dating situation where they feel pressure, or even around drugs and alcohol, to feel confident in their decision, whatever that is, and to not feel they have to be pressured to change their opinion or not trust their decision. So I think that is so impactful, because it's something that translates for your entire life. It's not something that you grow out of needing the skill for. And the same with that disappointment piece, right? Like, you don't grow out of being disappointed. It's not like, oh, now you're 18 and you're never going to be disappointed again. So I just think that is so interesting to think about, and so cool how you found something that, or you're sharing something rather, that is just so easy to apply and also so impactful.
Yes. Yeah. That's really, I think that the whole, if I can relay anything about language of listening, it's so incredibly simple, but it's so deep, how deep you can take it. And I love it because, you start doing the validating, and you start validating where your kids are at, and you solve the surface level issues, and then the deeper ones can start to come out. Right. And then you get better at your say what you see. Right. And you kind of deepen your own understanding of it. And the beautiful part of where you can offer it to yourself. I mean, that was what really clicked for me, and what really allowed me to become the kind of mom that I wanted to be. I talked about how the training was 2 years long. It was the last third of the second year when Sandy finally started to teach us about how to use the tools with ourselves. And that's when everything started to fall into place for me, because I was able to reparent myself. And again, get rid of that drama around my boundaries, and just go, oh my gosh, like this is just how things are. I just don't like it. And it's good for me to have boundaries, and it's good for me to model for my children how to hold boundaries in ways that leave both me and them feeling empowered. Like, you really can hold boundaries in a way that leaves both you and your child feeling empowered at the same time. Because so many parents out there are holding boundaries that leave them feeling like junk, feeling like they feel disempowered and the kid feels disempowered. Nobody wants that. It's just that our society hasn't really stepped up and taught us. It's happening. It's starting to happen, right? Like, thank goodness for language of listening. It's starting, it's starting to get out there to teach us, like, hey, like, actually, the parenting relationship can really be as good as we dreamed it would be. It's still going to be really hard. It's still going to take us, give us our highest highs and our lowest lows, probably.
Yeah.
Right. It's really, really difficult. But like, this is why I named my business Love the Way You Parent, because you really can love it like the way that you dreamed about it before you even became a mom. Because I think we all have that dream, and then reality hits, right? And for me, it was when I had 2 under 2. That was when that was when I got completely overwhelmed. I had 2 under 2. I could not split myself into 2 people, and it was just too difficult. And, to be able to get to a place where now I can handle the meltdowns, and they happen, I mean, very infrequently now. And when they do, I'm perfectly fine with it, because I know exactly what to do. And there's not a lot of drama around that. Sometimes there can still be drama, but that just shows me there's just that extra little piece of me that's still asking for a little attention to be paid. So I go back and I use the tools with myself, right? Like, it all fits into such a neat little package where there's just the 3 tools. That's it. There's just 3 tools. And they help us to empower ourselves, empower our kids, grow kids who have an unshakable confidence, give us back unconditional self-trust so we can pass it on to our kids and hold really, really, healthy.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. So one last question about it, because I want to apply it. And so I want to make sure that I'm fully, understanding. So with multiple kids, should it be done one at a time? Is that the key, or can it be done with multiple?
One-on-one. One-on-one.
Okay.
That's a fantastic question to ask. Yes.
Yeah.
You want to be
Yeah.
fully
That's so
focused
good
on
to know,
one
because it's only
child.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. And how often did you say we should be doing this?
Yeah. So when I work with my clients, I'll get them to take a 6-week time slot and and just choose one child. So sometimes that's really hard, because actually when I did my training, I was doing the half-hour playtimes, and I have 2 kids, and I'm like, and they're so close in age, I'm like, I can't just choose one. I gotta
Yeah.
do 2 playtimes, So I'd set them up and do them back to back, and that was fine.
Yeah.
But I get them just to pick 6 weeks to commit to. And I ask them to pick one child if they can. I understand if they're going to pick 2, and do 2 15-minute playtimes a week. And you want it to be something you can commit to. Yeah. So, and if you can only commit to one a week, then just do the one. Okay. But you want it to be something that you can write on your calendar, like a doctor's appointment, right? And see how you're feeling after that 6 weeks, and just see like what has changed and what has grown. And actually, I have like a handout that I can email. If anybody is interested in getting a handout from me that just kind of outlines how to get started with all the instructions, just send me an email. I'm happy to send you a link to the document. And
that's amazing.
We'll get you started. It's got all the basics, what to do and what you need and all that. Yeah.
That's so great. Yeah, I'll link your email in the show notes below, so everybody can reach out to you. This conversation has just been so valuable, Rose. I'm so grateful. I am blown away, truly. I think that there's just so much that I can take away, that anybody could take away, regardless of how they feel about their current parenting. I mean, if you're in a great spot, if you're in a tough spot, you can apply this. So I'm just so grateful. Personally, I'm going to be using all of it, and I'm excited. I'll tell you in 6 weeks how it goes with my twins. And I know they're young to do it, but I think it will be so great to start now, so that as they get older, it's something that we can do. And, with my husband and I, we can swap where we each take one, or, try to do it that way is kind of what I'm thinking. So
I've seen a lot of dads. I've seen a lot of dads get jealous of the connection they see happening between mom and the kids when mom's doing the playtimes, that they will come and say, Mom, you need to teach me how to do these too, because I want that connection with our kids as well. So
that
sweet.
is so cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, Rose, tell people how they can find you. Obviously, I'm going to link your email, but where are you on social media? And share anything that you want our listeners to know.
Yeah, if you just know my business name, Love the Way You Parent, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. My website's lovethewayouparent.com. I talk about my 12-week program for moms who want to get to a place where they love the way they parent. And I work, very directly with people one-on-one. And then, if people want to email me to get that worksheet, it's just love.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation. I'm so grateful, and I can't wait to hear about what our listeners take away from this episode and see how they apply it in their life. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Mom Boss Central. I hope you found inspiration, encouragement, and maybe even a few new strategies to rock your mom boss journey. Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And don't forget to share the love with your fellow mom bosses. Make sure to join the community at mombosscentral.com. It's completely free and a space to connect with like-minded women. All you have to do is sign up and start connecting. Until next time, keep pursuing your passions and living authentically. We're so happy to have you as part of the Mom Boss Central community.